Namaste and welcome to this exciting episode of Sathology Debunking Mythology. Sat means truth, Logos means a study or science. Sathology means the science of truth, or Sat also means eternal, science of eternal, or study of eternal, study of truth. Mythology, on the other hand, means a science or study of fake, lie, or imagination. Now, there has been so many lies I've written in my book for all the natives of the world written. If you look at my recent book, A Curse on the Natives, I've covered every single part of the world with pictures and proofs and how the natives were destroyed or tried to be destroyed. You look at South American story, Europeans, people do not know that before 6th century, European was not a Christian continent. It was not a Christian continent. It was a Greek or Latin continent or a Hindu continent. They all knew they all have come from India, their philosophy is from India. So the reverse RNA invasion theory is true, where the Europe was populated by people from India or Aryavrat. And also Asia. If you look at Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, north of Asia, Siberia was practically inhabitable, but still it had a lot of culture before it was occupied by the Orthodox Christian Church from Moscow, which is on the west side of Russia. So this story of natives, and I don't even want to go to Australia and Aborigines and Maoris, what has happened to them? The whole continent was snatched away by the European colonial powers. And USA, we all know the story, how Native Americans were destroyed by the church-based conquest of North America. And what even today they are struggling. In the case of India, it was a big, it was a prize. Everybody was looking for India at that time. I have very special guest. So this colonial history, and now Hindus are gradually understanding what happened to them. What happened to them? Beginning from Dutch defeat by Marthanda Varma in Kerala and throwing away of Mughal Empire in 1857 and 1858, and then becoming independent in 1947. It's a whole journey. And I think the real independence started in 2014, where the Hindus themselves became talking about themselves. Otherwise, the minority majority concept in India was so grossly applied, incorrectly applied, that even today we are still struggling. The Indians are still struggling. Majority of the Indians, natives are still struggling. I have a very special guest, author, and you love him. He comes on the show many times. So without delay, let us welcome Sri Prashant Paul.
Namaskar.
I could have gone on and on, but I had to stop quickly because I know you know more than me on this one. So when we talk about this, the whole experience we see that what happened to Hindus, even today it is there symbolically. Like the minority majority concept in India is so grossly implemented in India. So if you look at the Western worlds, the majority minority concept is based on the race, not on the faith. But in India is based on the faith, not on the race. So what is your view on that? And then we begin the resurgence of Hindus.
Yeah, you're right. See, up to few years back, that is in the year 2012 or 2011, when there was a UPA 2 government in India, the, the then Prime Minister had openly said in a public function that the first right on the resources in India is for minorities. Now, this is very ridiculous. There are more than 80%, 84% Hindus are there in India, probably even more than that. And Hindus started feeling that they are kind of second citizen in their own country, a country, like this India. And that was a major problem. That was a kind of a psychology of all the political parties, that bashing Hindus or even kind of a given more priority to the minorities could be okay. Hindus are anyway will vote us, so that doesn't really matter much. But then Hindus have really started awakening, and now, as you rightly said, that the actual independence was in the year 2014, and that's what after that, I think on 18th May 2014, the London Guardian had written the leading article, and therein they said that this is the this is the time when actual the Britishers or this colonial mind has washed away from India. That's what they have said. This is the actual victory of Indians. That's what they have said. But after that, I could see a clear-cut, visible, distinguishing factor from 2014, prior to that, and after that. Now I see that the Hindus are more vocal. There is a confidence among them, and that has reflected worldwide. That has an impact worldwide, and we see worldwide there is a inclination towards Hindutva. People are really started seriously thinking about Hindutva, and people started considering to adapt at least the Hindu way of life. They may formally convert themselves into Hindutva or not, that's different matter altogether. And that what I mean, as Indians, we do not even look into that. But the Hindu way of life, that is more important, and that basically teaches us that how a peaceful life could be spent. We always say Kurunvanto Vishwa Aryam, that is, the whole world should prosper, should be strengthened, powerful. That is what we always pray. We pray about the world. That is basically what is Hindutva. Recently, on the 26th October, not even a month before, the very prominent person from Indonesia, she had converted. Her name is Sukumavati Sukarnaputri. We all are aware that Sukarno was almost they call it as a father of a nation, sort of that, of Indonesia. He was a person who has literally built the nation that way, and they were the colony of Dutch. They somehow thrown away the Dutch empire, and then Sukarno was the first president of Indonesia. This Sukumavati Sukarnaputri, as the name suggests in Sanskrit, she is a daughter of President Sukarno. She is also a sister of Meghavati Sukarnopatri, who was also then the president of Indonesia. In all sense, she was even a leader of the local political party, a strong political party. So in all sense, she is the prominent figure, prominent person in Indonesia. And on 26th of October, last month, she had entered into Hindutva with a proper function and all. This function is called Shuddha or Sudhi Vadani. Sudhi Vadani, that's basically the actual name is Shuddhi Vidhan. Shuddhi Vidhan is a Sanskrit word by which anyone who is not in Hindu religion or who would like to follow the Hindu way of life could have some kind of mantras chanted and all some rituals, and then is considered that he is basically become an Hindu. So she did perform that function, that Shuddhi Vidhan or Sudhi Vadani. That function was held in Bali, a temple in Bali, because Corona protocol and all. That particular function, only invitees were supposed to be attended that. But after that, more than 28,000 followers, her followers, have converted into Hindutva. I see this as a sort of a kind of symbol that how worldwide people are looking into Hindutva. We all are aware that Indonesia has a lot of impact of Hindutva still today. And moreover, more interestingly, Indonesia is the largest Muslim dominated country or Muslim based country in the world. The Muslim population in Indonesia is the largest among all the countries in the world. This largest Muslim populated country always carry the Hindu heritage and proudly carries the Hindu heritage. It's not that all Muslims in Indonesia endorse that, probably may not, because there is one province wherein the Sharia law is still implemented. If you go there, you have to go through that Sharia law and all this, whatever the way they punish in a Sharia law, those kind of punishments are there. So there is a state in Indonesia. But otherwise, as a country, Indonesia always proudly say that yes, they have the Hindu legacy, they are proud of it, and that's the reason their embassy in US carries a statue of Saraswati, the goddess Saraswati, who is the goddess of education, who is the goddess of Buddhi, they call it. So in this Indonesia, the Muslim Sukumavati, Sukarnaputri, have converted or have come back to her Hindu religion was a symbolic major fact that how people are looking into the Hindutva. But this is not the only incidence. Even prior to that, on 17th July 2017, around say 4 years back, the Javanese princess, we all know that Indonesia is basically a country of so many islands, small islands, bigger islands, so many islands. That's basically the Indonesia. Thousands of islands are there in Indonesia. Java, which was earlier used to call in all Indian Puranas, Indian ancient literature, it's called Yavadvip. The Yavadvip is called Java. So Java, Sumatra are basically the major islands in Indonesia. So that Javanese princess, Kanjeng Mahindrani, she performed the similar Sudhi Vadani, that is Shuddhi Vidhan, 4 years back, 17 July 2017. And she was also came back to Hindu religion or Hindu way of life. She started following Hindu way of life. Prior to that, even whether Kanjeng Mahindrani, the princess, Javanese princess, or Sukumavati Sukarnaputri, they all were following sort of a Hindutva, Hindu way of life. But formally now they have also entered into the Hindutva. Again, as I said that, it's not the only exceptional cases in Indonesia. In last 10 to 15 years, it is said that, the figures are there, figures say that more than 150,000, the official figures are saying, more than 150,000 Muslims were converted back to Hindutva. That is, these are the official figures from Indonesia. However, the unofficial figures are saying that more than 200,000 Muslims have converted back to or come back to Hindutva. Now, this is something really interesting, because when we see the Hindu population other than India, then Nepal is, India is 1 billion, so Nepal is 2.5 crores, that is around 25 million. Next to it is not Bangladesh now. Earlier it was Bangladesh. And Indonesia was the fourth. Now Indonesia is third. And Indonesia is around more than 2 crore Hindus are there. As regards to the percentage of population in Indonesia of Hindus, if we consider 10 years back in 2008, in that census, the Hindu population in Indonesia was 1.34 or 35. Today, the percentage of Hindu population in Indonesia is 1.74, and probably that too also around 3 to 4 years back. Those figures are there, and they predict. They say that probably it has already crossed 2.5%. This is remarkable. Probably Indonesia, I mean, other Muslim-dominated countries like Bangladesh, Pakistan, Afghanistan, whatever the Hindu population was there, that is decreasing. But Indonesia, it is increasing. So my point here is that for Hindutva, there is a global attraction. There is a global inclination. And Indonesia is not only exception. There are other countries also wherein there is a great interest, curiosity, attraction about Hindu way of life, of Hindutva is increasing. So that's a good symbol for the peace-living people, for the people who would like to spend their life in a peaceful manner, in a samruddha way of life. And that's what actually happening worldwide. That's my point.
You gave a great example of Java Dweep. Actually, in Ramayana Mahabharata also it's called Yavadweep. And one of the, like you correctly said in the beginning, that it was so much suppressed during the last regimes, it's like of India before 2014, that it was almost suffocation for Hindus, even worldwide. So not just India is happy. People in South America are happy that there is finally a government which talks about yoga, talks about Bhagavad Gita. Like all other governments did not even emphasize that. They were ashamed of that. And you can see that in Prime Minister's visit to Scotland. Scotland has a large Scottish Hindu population, Scottish Hindu. And even though England ruled India, but most of the people loved India's yoga. One of the prime ministers of India was of UK was born in India. David Cameron was born in India. So it is not just relief to Hindus in India; it's a relief to the global Hindu community, not just India. Now, tell me one thing: that how this Supreme Court system, you are a citizen, so I wouldn't like you have a limit to say what you can say, but I can say as an American citizen, I can say the Supreme Court of India also never supported or played into the hands of the Western powers. Like, for example, festivals of India, they would always release a judgment on no firecrackers on Diwali. That's only one day. If most of the Indians or media personalities were worried about pollution, there are a lot of pollutions happening, including slaughterhouses in Punjab, which are the worst. But they never said a single word about that. Also, things like eating of beef in Kerala and West Bengal and Kashmir, and purposefully killing in front of them. Even in the US, I can tell you one thing, that when Americans know that I do not, it's for me, it's the beef or cow is sacred. They will never order with me. Like, this is a culture. And I have been here mainstream in the American society. It's so tolerable. They will never, even the Muslims in America will not order anything which hurts my sentiments.
Yeah.
So that is the culture. Only in India, they will go out in the public and kill, or in Pakistan. So how these things have changed and what has evolved in the Hindu resurgence, because there is a tolerance only from one side, Hindus, which are the majority of the population, and but the other population is mocking them. How did this hurt the sentiments of Hindus?
Yeah, you're right. And as you rightly pointed out, that prior to that, whether it's a complete the legal system in India or the ruling party or the people who were ruling the country, they all were trying to suppress the Hindus because they all wanted to have the minority vote bank in a bundle. So it's a bundled minority vote bank. They wanted to suppress Hindus because Hindus are anyway. I mean, Hindu didn't have any voice. Hindu didn't have any power of their votes, and that's the reason prior to pre-2014 era, if we see, from the ruling party, there was a constant bashing on the Hindu sentiments. And when the ruling party is bashing, naturally, people think that it is a trend in this country. So large corporates, when I say large corporates, they include even the Indian companies, multinationals are anywhere there. They were releasing the advertisements which were hurting the Hindu sentiments. And they were constantly doing it. Even I saw that few years back, the large corporates used to release the advertisement on Christmas, that Merry Christmas. That's fine, good. They were releasing advertisement on the occasion of Eid Mubarak. Fine, no problem in it. But they were releasing the advertisement during Diwali saying that don't play with the crackers. Crackers are harmful. Consider pollution and all these things. They can't even say that Happy Diwali. They were teaching us. And that's basically the problem. But there is a now sea change, and that's what my point here is. There is a sea change. This time, even a social activist, Shefali Vaidya, has started a moment. No bindi, no business. This means that don't hurt our Hindu sentiments on the Hindu festivals. You do on your own festivals, we don't mind. But on our own festival, whatever the kind of advertisement you are releasing, that should respect the Hindu feelings and Hindu sentiments. It should honor the Hindu festivals in a proper manner. And that got, and otherwise the other momentum has got a great kind of moment wherein even the multinationals, the corporates, they understood that now they cannot play around with the Hindu sentiments. That's the major change I have seen. I've also seen that the world before Corona and world after this pandemic Corona is different. Worldwide, there is a more attraction towards the Hindutva because the yoga, the Ayurveda, the way Ayurveda was sold globally during this pandemic era was enormous. All the Ayurveda manufacturing companies in India did extremely well in last 2 years. They did their export was increased manifold because worldwide people were trying to use the Ayurveda because the Hindu way of life is a is a life which is basically a proper hygienic and normal life. No artificial kind of things. Everything is natural. The yoga, the way yoga was accepted by all the countries, including even the Muslim countries, that is again enormous. And that's the reason people have started an attraction towards the Hindutva. So during this kind of last few years, 5-6 years, I should say, there is a major curiosity for India, the Indian culture, the Indian yoga, the Indian Ayurveda, the Indian way of life, the Hindu way of life. And I gave the example of Indonesia. That is a symbolic example. Again and again, I'm saying it's not only Indonesia, everywhere, even in Europe. You mentioned about Scottish people and all. When recently, last week, when the PM visited Italy, the local Italian people have chanted the Hindu mantra. They welcome the Prime Minister Modi by chanting, by reciting the Hindu mantra, Veda mantra. So Veda mantra Udghosh was there in the Italy while receiving or welcoming the Prime Minister of India. That never happened earlier. Never happened earlier. The earlier prime ministers were sort of ashamed of Hindutva. That was a major problem of India. And when the prime minister was ashamed of India, when the head of the country is ashamed of India, naturally, why other countries will respect your religion? They will not, they will never. And that is basically the major change which is happening now. When the country head is, he himself is giving a lot of respect, or he's giving a total respect to the Hindutva. He's proudly saying that, yes, I follow Hindu religion, Hindu way of life. He do yoga. He proudly say, yes, I follow yoga. He proudly say, I follow the Indian way of life. He very proudly goes to Sri Ram temple. He proudly goes to Kedarnath temple. This is what required. These are our roots. This is our legacy. This is our heritage. Unfortunately, in last 60, 65 years down the line, the country head were not really having any sort of proud on their own heritage. That was a major problem. And exactly same thing happened in 1478 when the Indonesian, the then empire, who was basically the emperor of Majapahit Empire. The Majapahit Empire was that time in 1478 was headed by King Brawijaya. King Brawijaya had converted himself into Islam. Why it happened? Because the entire India was their source of energy. India was their Punya Bhumi. What is the definition of Hindutva or Hindu? Asindhu Sindhu Parenta Yasya Bharata Bhumika. But it's not only limited to that. It's not only people who is residing in India. No. Asindhu Sindhu Parenta Yasya Bharata Bhumika Pitrubhu Punya Bhumaischa. Pitrubhu Punya Bhushchaiva Savai Hindu Riti Smrutaha. Those who consider this land as Punya Bhumi, a holy land, they are also Hindu. And that's why for Indonesian people, not only Indonesian, for Cambodian people, for Vietnamese people, for Laos people, for Thailand people, for Singapore people, for Malaysian people, all the Southeast Asian people, this India, this Hindustan was their holy land. They used to respect that. But when the holy land have accepted the Islam, how they could follow Hinduism? How they could follow Hindutva? Naturally, when your source of energy is lost, because Southeast Asia that time was almost sort of an annexure of India. It was a real wealth was generated there during this Hindu regime. Whether it's a Srivijaya Samrajya, whether it's a Khem Samrajya, Unan Samrajya of Cambodia, of Laos, Vietnam, this Java, Sumatra, that is Srivijaya, Indonesia, or this Thailand, all these countries, everywhere, it was the Hindu way of life. They used to recite the Veda, the Upanishad, Ramayana, Mahabharata was their kind of the kind of a books or grantha, wherein they have total respect to that. Unfortunately, because this India became the sort of under the control of Islam, naturally there was a disconnect between India and the Southeast Asia. So it is but natural that those people have followed the Islam. However, as regards to Indonesia, because we started with the example of Indonesia, Indonesian people have maintained their heritage. In their Bahasa Indonesia, more than 60-70% words are from Sanskrit. So if you go to Indonesia, you will feel more homely than in India, because in India we use a lot of Urdu words, a lot of English words. They don't. Wherever they didn't find word, any similar word, they used the Sanskrit word. So everywhere, adhikosh and all, so many words are there which they are using in Sanskrit. So more homely. So understanding that is relatively much simpler. Point here is that this happened from 1478, and when King Brahvijaya was converted into into Islam, and the Majapahit Empire, the entire empire became the Islam Empire. That time, his advisor and the priest, that is Shabda Palan. Shabda Palan is very respected kind of a personality in Indonesia. He he told he said about the future. He said after 500 years, he cautioned his king that please don't go with Islamic forces. Please don't accept Islam as a religion. This Hindu way of life is good. Don't convert yourself into Islam. King didn't follow his kind of caution. So then he said, he told about the future. He said that after 500 years in Indonesia, again the Hindu way of life will start, will be there. People started adopting the Hindu way of life again. In 1978, they completed a large Hindu temple in Bali. And now we see that, as I said, that in last 10 to 15 years, more than 200,000 Muslims in Indonesia have converted into Hindutva. Well, this figure is very meager, very small as compared to the total population of Indonesia. That's fine. Point here is that there is an inclination, there is an attraction. People wanted to join, people wanted to follow the Hindu way of life. And while following the Hindu way of life, they wanted to become the Hindu. That's more important. And again, I say, during my last, our conversation about the Vaishvik Ganesh, I said it's not only Indonesia, it's like Ghana. A lot of local Africans are become Hindu. They recite the mantra. It's very interesting. Swami Krishnan did a lot of work in Ghana. Now Swami Ghanananda is doing there. And why only that? Italy example I gave. Netherlands you go to other European countries, you will find that there is a major kind of attraction towards the Hindutva. They are trying to find out the real people who can tell them, who can teach them what is actual Hindutva, who can teach them the meaning of various Sanskrit books, who can teach them the meaning of Upanishada, the Veda. That's what they are trying to follow. They are trying to understand. You are there in the US, so you can understand very well in the US that how the inclination towards the they try to follow the Hindu way of life. Latin America, again, there is a increasing trend to follow the Hindu way of life. And this, I feel, is a major change, And this change is mainly because, that's what I personally feel is, mainly because there is a very firm country head, a Prime Minister of India, who himself very proudly follow the Hindu way of life, the Hindutva, and he is very proud to say that, yes, I am Hindu. That is making a total change. And if that continued, I'm damn sure that worldwide people will get attracted towards the Hindu philosophy, towards the Hindu way of life, and they start following it. So I'm damn sure about it.
Very well put it, because when the yad acharati shreshthas tatta devetaro jana. So when the Shrestha or the leader follows a culture, the whole population gets energized. And I think this is the problem with the Indian opposition also. One thing I've seen a major problem is that anything Western is copied in India by this leftist media and the Bollywood and just popularized in India. Like, for example, gay rights or lesbian rights. Now, Article 377 was abolished in India, and and Hindu culture is the only culture which has never persecuted these people based on their personal choices. It has never happened. Like in India, there is a custom of calling, uh, they call it hijra in India, and calling these people home in marriages when the child is born. There's a culture there, and people, rest of the world doesn't know. And bringing the same sex videos or the what is happening in the US doesn't make sense. Do you think that these media personalities or people who are popularizing it or the academics who are talking about it, they do not even understand what is happening in the West, or they do not understand what is wokeism in the West? Wokeism in the West is against the racist colonial USA, which destroyed the Native American culture.
Yes.
And that's why the critical race theory or wokeism is there in the US. But India, those things don't apply, where the majority of the population has always given preference to other people. And so those definitions do not apply to India, but still these people talk about it as if they are not even educated. So why this kind of mindset is there, or it is deliberate just to antagonize Hindus or trouble Hindus or humiliate Hindus?
I fully agree with you. And this trend is from the beginning. Beginning, when I say beginning, I mean to say that after the independence, this kind of psychology is basically there. And it is so kind of hammered again and again that anything, if you talk about Hindu or ancient, even if you quote any Sanskrit word or something, then the sentiments of minority, particularly Muslims, get hurt. So please don't talk about it. The Doordarshan, that is the government TV channel in India called Doordarshan. The Doordarshan had a symbol, Satyam Shivam Sundaram. In between, that symbol was banned because it is Sanskrit. In Akashvani also, there are certain things were banned. There is a train, Rajdhani Express. That Rajdhani Express has all the audio video systems and all, audio system particularly. When the UPA government was there, I mean the Congress-led government was there a few years back in India, those days, in the early morning, to wake up the passengers and all, they used to play the bhajan, the Sanskrit or Hindi bhajans. Then there were certain people who said, no, you should stop it because it's only Hindu. It's hurting the sentiments of Muslims and other minorities. And there is a country like Indonesia, the largest Muslim populated country in Indonesia, which is keeping a Saraswati idol at its embassy in US. That is printing Lord Bhagwan Ganesha on its currency note. That is basically using everywhere, or calling Deva Ganesha, and Ganesha temples are there, other Hindu deities temples are there, and etc. Point here is that that kind of psychology, that kind of a philosophy, that kind of mindset was created. It was basically, one of the reasons was, I even mentioned earlier that who was the first education minister in India? Abul Kalam Azad. He was the Minister of Education in India for initial 11 years, from 1947 onwards, 11 years. Now, who was he? His ancestors came with Babur as invaders. During the 1857 War of Independence, his father ran away, went to Makkah. He married a local girl there in Makkah. His father, his mother, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad's mother, was from Makkah. He studied in madrasa totally. He started, when he became graduate and all from madrasa, he started the two Urdu journals which were totally radical in Muslim mindset. He started, why I'm telling you all these things, because how the mindset was created and generated in India. He was one of the founder member of this Aligarh Muslim University. He was a person who was basically a Muslim radical vision he has. And Congress used him just to have as a poster boy against Jinnah. Because Muslim League has a Jinnah, yes, we have Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. That's fine. But after independence, he became the Minister of Education. And we all are aware that how the country is built. After the independence of our own, when we can take our own decisions, the country can decide its own kind of curriculum, the way it should go and all. Unfortunately, this person was there and he had set up kind of a the education system wherein saying Hindu is a problem. Talking about Sanskrit is a problem, hurting the sentiments of Muslims and all. And that's basically the mindset. And that carried on. And then there are the communist people who carried the same kind of mindset. They all multiplied together. And that's the reason, till few years back, they all were bashing the Hindu sentiments constantly and continuously. Unfortunately, by and large, the common Hindu people were not aware about it. That yes, something wrong is going on. They felt that probably yes, this is the way of life. No awakening. But this is the country of Hindus and how we have survived. I mean, the history says that wherever the Muslim invaders ruled, even for 1 or 2 generations, the entire country became Muslim, including Indonesia. But in India, what happened? More than 700 years, 600, 700 years, the Muslim ruled. But we have still Hindus. And that's something different in Hindu religion. And that's something different what our ancestors have created this society, this Hindu psychology, Hindu philosophy, Hindu way of life. How a country can be united, how a country can be organized or united. Can religion be a point? No, religion can't be a point. If religion could have been the point, the entire Europe could have been the one country. Why there are different countries are there in the Europe? Because all are Christian countries. As you rightly said that after 6th century, the entire almost the entire Europe become the Christian. Then why different countries are there? And not only different countries, the worst wars were fought on the soil of Europe. All first World War, Second World War, they started with the Europe. Why? They all were Christian. From Morocco to here, Afghanistan and all these countries are Muslim countries. All Arab countries are Muslim. They have the same religion. Why they are fighting with each other? Because it's not only religion which can bind you, which can unite you. It's something else. And our ancestors understood what is that something is in our country. And that's the reason we were as a country. The great Alexander, they call it Alexander the Great. He was not the great that way. But anyway, when he came to India, he could reach up to the banks of river Sindhu. On the banks of river Sindhu, there are various small empires were there, like Katha, Malav, Kshudrak, Agrashani, Pattan, Prastha, Takshashila, and so many. Takshila was lost and other were lost. But these empires were fighting with each other. That's fine. But when this foreign kind of invaders have come, they came together, united. The most interesting point here is that there were two kind of small empires, Malav and Kshudrak. They have rivalry. They were basically enemies that way. But when they knew that no, this is the foreign invader, they become one. They become one, that's fine. But how a common citizen have kind of assimilation? What they did? They did perform 10,000 marriages in only 2 months among this Malav bride to Kshudrak groom and Kshudrak bride to Malav groom and all. 10,000 marriages, so that some assimilation has to be there. Some bonding has to be generated. When this Hoon and all have come, this Malav king, Yashovarma, He fought with Mihir Gul, the king of Huns, and destroyed him. When this Shak have come, this Satavahan Empire, Gautam Putra Satkarni, he came and he killed that Shak king Nahman. So many such examples are there. Point here is that Hindu existence is there because there is a very strong elements are there which tell us that how to spend a nice, peaceful, prosperous life. That's the essence of Hindutva. Hindutva is not a hatred community. Hindutva is not a hatred religion, if you call it as a religion. Hindutva is not a hatred way of life. Hindutva says, Krunvanto Vishwaryam. The whole world should be prosperous. That's the feeling of Hindutva. And that's why I feel that because now India becomes strong, India is getting strong now day by day, there is a major resurgence worldwide about Hindutva. That's what I feel.
You know, we have seen the different causes and throughout the world how it is respected. Especially in the US, people respect India because of yoga, Rishikesh. I always said it before also. Rishikesh, yoga. Rishikesh is considered the capital of yoga in the US. And that's how the Rishikesh people also call themselves as the capital of yoga. But that's where the India is respected. There is a soft power. You know, all the countries, other countries derive their power from politics. This is the first time in the history of India, I think probably after Chandragupta Maurya or Cholas or Chalukyas or Pallavas, this is the first time a Hindu leader is in power who is not shy to say. Like recently, Padma Awards is also a function where most of the local grassroots people were awarded. This is the first time we saw Padma Awards really being given to qualified people and people who did not know. And the elitist culture of Delhi, Lutyens media, they also call it, that was really a display that how they were feeling low and they were feeling not energized. So what has changed in the Padma Awards function also, which shows that the original thought process of rewarding karma has come in.
Very true. You exactly pointed out the right thing. That Padma Award, which is basically a connect to the common people, a connect to a person who are actually doing some good work in a society and not only the superficial kind of thing. And those people who are really working hard in the society, sometimes they are very oppressed, sometimes they are very poor, sometimes they are people of very low kind of income group and all, but they are the people, they are the actual heroes of this country who have built this society. And that's why their recognition is very important. Earlier to this, there was no recognition at all to these people. Padma Awards were only sort of given to, of course, there were some good people, but sort of given to only some high class, high grade kind of people only. No. But in last few years, the government is recognizing the efforts of the common people. That's very important. That recognition is important. In India, this depressed class was not recognized earlier. Now it is happening. And that's why the Lutyens may have disturbed a lot. That's fine. But there is a connect among the common people and the government of India. That's I feel very important for India.
The one of the things on the Padma Awards is Padma is itself a Sanskrit word, lotus.
Yes.
Lotus award, Padma.
Yes.
The lotus symbol is very common across Southeast Asia, China, as a sacred symbol, where Buddha is always associated with lotus, because according to Sanatan Dharma, Buddha is an incarnation of Vishnu, and that's why. And he came for a certain purpose. And because he rejected Veda, We do not worship him, but still we respect him as an incarnation of Vishnu. For a certain purpose he came. The dates, big confusion the Western world creates. My question to the Western academics who are watching is, what is your, like, what authority you have got to comment on Sanatan Dharma culture or Hindu culture when you are not part of the culture or don't understand the language? So the purpose is, I know, I can tell for to them directly, the purpose is that you want to sell your narrative to your own people. And the problem is of Indians now, the so-called Latins Indians or the coconuts or the brown Angrez of India, Makole Putra, that they are the ones who are taking the Western world's interpretation to teach to Indians, where Western world is teaching to their own people. Ideally, the role of the Indians should be to correct them, not to accept it. But we do not see the proactiveness of the Indian academics and the Indian universities trying to correct the wrong notions of Hindu history being taught in USA and the Western world. It is the responsibility of the Indian academics to counter them point by point, but that doesn't happen. They literally they use, for example, Will Durant has done an excellent job on a book on India with atrocities, what he has mentioned, but still he is a Western author. There should be a talk about that, how Indian authors like Sampath recently spoke about Savarkar, that how he correctly, and I think he also got the Padma Award this time. So
Yeah.
so why that doesn't happen? Is it still the colonial Indians, or why they are not questioning that?
I fully agree with you. The decolonizing minds, it's going to take time. It will take some time. That's what I personally feel that. The learning and unlearning, therein unlearning is also important. Similarly, the decolonizing minds is also important. And that process, I feel that it's already started. The decolonizing process has already started. And now people started thinking about the swa, that is self. What was the actual strength of India? What India was or is? So that swatva is very, very important. And that's now people, academicians have started realizing it. And that's, I feel, is very important in Indian context. And probably now in near future, there will be people who will uh, come forward. Like Sanjeev Sanyal have wrote some very good books on Indian history and all such things. Like that, there are people who will write, and all those hidden treasure will come forward, come to the world. That process is decolonizing process has already started. That much I could certainly say.
UK is known to harbor anti-Hindu sentiments always, even today, and they see India as an ex-colony. They don't see it as an independent nation. Now, Australia, they have already captured. New Zealand, they have already captured. Canada is a suzerainty, you can call it, is B state of UK.
Yeah.
But still, you'll see Indian politicians, some of the politicians, I won't name him because it's not worth it. They go to London for vacation. And the Bollywood and all the so-called gulams of the West, they go to the, so gulams means slaves, so most of them don't understand. The slaves of the, and when I talk about West means I talk about not just Western countries, I talk about the church and the Abrahamic faith systems. So the slaves of this West, they come to London all the time for inspiration. And believe me, when I first went to London, I went to London many years back for the first time. I literally thought of Thames River as a big drain. It's so small, tiny, and filled with water which is not flowing. It doesn't look like a river. It looks like dam. They're protected through dams, so the water levels are maintained. If that water level is gone, it will look like a small drain, like not more than 30 feet wide, not more than that. So the point is glorifying something which is not worth glorifying. Like when you go to Ganga, and whenever I go to India, I get a chance to visit Ganga, you cannot see the other shore. In fact, you will be standing on a tributary of Ganga, on an island of Ganga. You don't even know there's an island. You're just standing there. Somewhere you go to Rishikesh or somewhere in Haridwar you go. But these people, they make such a big deal what they saw in Swiss Alps, it's like a very tiny places. Like India has much more beautiful sceneries than that. South America has much more beautiful sceneries than that. But they would always make a big deal. Isn't that still a colonization mindset? And they are the ones who are the keepers of the British colonial power in India.
You're right. It's basically a colonial mindset, and that still continued. And as I said, that people listen who is basically the ruling the world. If you have power, if you have strength, people will see how you are doing. People try to follow you. As simple as that. This Britishers have ruled us for almost 190 years, almost, some parts and all. So they tried very deliberately to colonize the mindset of Indians. Really, it was a deliberate attempt by the Britishers, with the help of their education systems, the healthcare system, the overall administrative systems and all. They tried to do it deliberately. Now, this unlearning or decolonizing of the whole thing is certainly required. And I agree with you. Why only always go to Europe or other Western countries just to spend the holidays and all? But that is basically kind of, when it was during the colonial period, it was going on, that still they continued, and that was sort of a mindset. And when the leading personalities, the leading leaders, the leading political figures, when they follow certain things, when they do certain things, other people, common people, follow them. It's simple kind of equation. But again, I say I'm very optimistic in that decolonization process is already started. It will take some time, probably a few years, but I'm damn sure that the decolonization is going to happen. And the swatwa of that feeling about the understanding of our oneness, our own kind of strength, is basically happening. People start understanding our heritage, our legacy, our roots, and how kind of rich we were with that. They understand. And that's why I say that the Hindu resurgence is in this context. Yes, that understanding, awakening of that is very, very important. At the end, I just want to quote Swami Vivekananda in this context, basically. When in 1999, when he was going to US second time, he wrote an article, East and West. That's the heading of the article. Therein he had written, and I quote, "Now you understand clearly where the soul of the progress is. It is in religion. Because no one was able to destroy that, therefore the Hindu nation is still living." That's what Swami Vivekananda had said in 1999. And I firmly believe that, yes, that, sorry, 1899, I said 1990, it is 1899, Swami Vivekananda, when he was going there in 1899, he said that. My point here is that, yes, with Swami Vivekananda's whatever he has said in 1899, around 121 years ago, that is now really happening. That's how the Hindu nation, Hindu Rashtra is still there and will certainly prosper. And worldwide, the Hindu resurgence is there, and that will be enhanced, will be even more incidences we will see later.
If
Yes.
you look at Mahabharata and Ramayana, in Ramayana also, Sri Ram prepared for 4 months before they attacked Ravana. 4 months they prepared. Chaturmas and Sugriva assembled his armies, and then they attacked Ravana with full military might. In terms of numbers, they matched the numbers. In Mahabharata, Narad Muni tells Yudhishthir, "Do your armies work to propagate Sanatan Dharma to bring peace to the world?" He says that. So that is the purpose of a nation's army, to bring Sanatan Dharma to other parts of the world. In fact, if you look at Ramayana and Mahabharata, they both made Hastinapur as their standard, even Ramayana also. Hastinapur as a base, because Hastinapur is right in the middle between the boundary of Uttar Kuru and Lanka, uh, uh, Kerala, right in the middle. So that is the capital of India also today. Near that, Indraprasth is the capital. Still today, Indraprasth is the capital. So what I'm trying to say, that this Sanya Shakti is also an important arm in Sanatan Dharma, which Indians were made to forget. Like, you are a peaceful, you're not. Ideally, why people are trusting India right now, because India is showing the military might also, to some extent. Balakot strikes and other strikes showed that India can operate at free will. But if it doesn't become a regular feature, then the pride of the culture doesn't come in. So the boundaries of, like, the India, where, and that is the purpose of the armies. The purpose of the armies is, wherever there is adharma, they should remove it and put dharma there. Dharma means peace and prosperity for people. So a lot of countries are occupied in the Indian West. A lot of countries are free in the India's east because of India, because they could not cross India freely. So India has maintained peace on the east because of India, and because India came in the middle. But India's west is very disturbed for the entire world, not just for India. So the point is, unless we act in that direction, how can we bring peace inside India? Once India starts acting, then all these voices are going to stop. What do you have to say on that? And this is Narada saying, this is Chanakya saying, this is all the rishis are saying. What do you say?
Yeah, I what do you say? I agree with that. That kind of whatever the might we have, that has to be used in a proper manner. That strength has to be always shown, that yes, we do have the strength. And that's what, when the people have seen the strength of it, people have seen that how military wise we are getting more mightier. Naturally, people start respecting our country. So from economy is also a power. So that's also wealth. So economy, the military, and the education. On these three fronts, if we really work hard, and that's what we are doing, and proper implementation of that with proper military power, that has to be used in a proper way to respect our selfhoodness of the country. If that happens, I'm damn sure that whatever picture we have seen today could be much, much better in near future. I'm damn sure about it.
So, thank you so much, Prashant Polji, because this is a big topic, but we try to cover all different aspects. And only
Yeah,
one thing we missed is the literature or the Shastra,
yeah,
Vedic Shastra. We can cover it
yeah,
next time. Hindu resurgence, why it is on the basis of India's most popular book, Bhagavad Gita. No one
yes,
has ever come close to it. And believe me, I can tell you, since 1965, if you calculate all the Indian organizations in the West, more than 1 billion copies have been sold. 1 billion copies. Okay, so just one organization is gone. Then there is Chinmaya Mission. Then there is a different organizations are there. They've sold 1 billion copies of Bhagavad Gita all over the world. So thank you all. It is still the largest distributed literature on the planet, other than any other book, because the new people are getting it, not just the population explosion is getting it. So thank you all, and for watching the show, and thank you for coming on the show. Do share on YouTube and let us know how you feel. Namaste.
namaskar.